Welcome to Mountain Strong. Today I have come to what locals here in Anchorage call the ballpark. I've come up Little O'Malley, or rather O'Malley Gully. I made that same mistake in the last video. I've come up O'Malley Gully and have progressed along this trail, and I didn't know how long this trail was going to last. I've been walking for a couple of miles and this kind of seems to keep on going. And again, you get a sense of the vastness of the Chugach State Park. But had a wonderful encounter along the way here. I'm not sure as of this moment how this video is going to have turned out. I was kind of a little bit like like a fan at a concert or something, but I came across some Dall sheep and I just didn't know how close they were going to let me get, and they let me get very, very close. In fact, I stopped and they walked past me at a distance of, I don't know, maybe 10 yards or so. And so it was really cool. I haven't had anything like that happen on these hikes yet, or at all in my life, I think, to have an animal as exotic as that come up so close. Usually, Dall sheep can be hard to spot up here in the park, but they just happened to walk right past me. But anyway, we have been coming along this walk a little bit. I'll probably go a little bit further, starting to notice some of the smoke. If you can see kind of the cloudiness about the place, that's smoke from the fire down in the Kenai Peninsula right now. And so that smoke comes all the way up here. There aren't any trees, as you can see. There's nothing on fire here, but that smoke is just coming up. It's a massive fire down there. And so obviously, I don't know when this video is going to come out, but just keep Alaska in your prayers, because this happens from time to time. And it doesn't usually affect people, but certainly affects travel, and obviously affects quality of breathing quality. Maybe people who have asthma might be having trouble and that kind of thing. But anyway, just stopped here, happened to notice that there was a little bit of actually last season's snow back there, which is kind of cool, and thought it was a good place to pause. We're going to have a look at Psalm number 102 today. Let's read. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Let my cry come to you. Do not hide your face from me in the day of my distress. Incline your ear to me. Answer me speedily in the day when I call. For my days pass away like smoke, and my bones burn like a furnace. My heart is struck down like grass and is withered. I forget to eat my bread. Because of my loud groaning, my bones cling to my flesh. I am like a desert owl of the wilderness, like an owl of the waste places. I lie awake. I am like a lonely sparrow on the housetop. All the day my enemies taunt me. Those who deride me use my name for a curse. For I eat ashes like bread and mingle tears with my drink, because of your indignation and anger. For you have taken me up and thrown me down. My days are like an evening shadow. I wither away like grass. But you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. You are remembered throughout all generations. You will arise and have pity on Zion. It is the time to favor her. The appointed time has come. For your servants hold her stones dear and have pity on her dust. Nations will fear the name of the Lord, and all the kings of the earth will fear your glory. For the Lord builds up Zion. He appears in his glory. He regards the prayer of the destitute and does not despise their prayer. Let this be recorded for a generation to come, so that a people yet to be created may praise the Lord, that he looked down from his holy height. From heaven the Lord looked at the earth, to hear the groans of the prisoners, to set free those who were doomed to die, that they may declare in Zion the name of the Lord, and in Jerusalem his praise, when peoples gather together and kingdoms to worship the Lord. He has broken my strength in mid-course. He has shortened my days. O my God, I say, take me not away in the midst of my days, you whose years endure throughout all generations. Of old you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will change them like a robe, and they will pass away. But you are the same, and your years have no end. The children of your servants shall dwell secure. Their offspring shall be established before you. After several Psalms examining the praise of God and our relationship with God, we finally come to another complaint psalm, a psalm in which the psalmist is bringing a petition to God. In verses 1 and 2, he directs God to pay attention to his request. He calls upon him not to hide his face. And so remember that language that we've seen previously in the Psalms along those lines. He's crying out to God. And again, when doing so, you see the heart of the psalmist bare, open, and it encourages us to have that same attitude in approaching God. Well, what's the problem? Well, as it relates to the request in verses 3 through 11, there are three components of the request. One, there is some kind of physical suffering that the psalmist is enduring. Is this physical suffering that he's enduring for himself? There is the indication from verses 23 and 24 that he's been kind of cut off mid-course, and so there's something that's been happening to him. But at the same time, in verses 13 and 14, there's a reference made to Zion and something that's happening to that nation. And so it could be a combination of both. It could be that the city of Jerusalem has been attacked. This could be obviously one of the attacks on Jerusalem. It could be post-Babylonian captivity. We don't know the timing of this psalm, but something could be happening to Jerusalem and something happening to the psalmist at the same time. But whatever's happening to the psalmist, he feels really isolated in this. And in verses 6 through 8, you see the second aspect of his prayer, the fact that he is alone. And the only people who are around him in verse 8 are those who are taunting him, those who are making fun of him. And they're making fun of him because in verses 9 through 11, he is engaging in continual mourning. You see him eating ashes. And so usually sackcloth and ashes associated with mourning. He's mourning intensely. But the third aspect of his prayer is not his mourning. The third aspect of his prayer is the fact that he sees that God is angry at him. And remember, in the Psalms, a part of the life of faith is attributing anything that happens to you, whether good or bad, to God. The psalmists typically say that if it's good, it came from God. If it's bad, it came from God. If it's bad, though, you're allowed to come to God and ask why. Why am I enduring this? And so he's experiencing God's anger. He doesn't know why. He says, God, please hear me. But at that moment he reflects upon God. And rather than seeing a God who is angry at him, he allows something very important to enter into the picture. And I think really that's the big lesson that we can take from this psalm. He allows eternality to enter into the moment. When you're reflecting upon God, you realize that God is eternal, that God has no beginning and no end. He is a line on a graph. You know how you used to draw those arrows on either side of a line, and it stretches one way, it stretches the other way into infinity, and that is our God. And so when you think about a moment of suffering, when you think about a moment of pain, realize that you can't separate a moment from eternity when you're living in the life of faith. You can't set apart the moment from God's eternal purpose. Everything is moving towards God's eternal purpose, every aspect of this world. And my story is just one tiny little speck in this grand tapestry that God is weaving, a story of salvation for the saved in Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. And obviously I want my speck to be on the side of the saved, and I want that story to be mine as well. Eternity has to enter into the picture of my suffering. I have to engage it as I consider what I'm enduring. And so I love how he stops there and how he says, of course he's calling for God to arise and help Zion, but he believes he will. He believes that God is going to help Zion and care for him. And I love this little indication of the God that we serve in verse 14. Why do you need to arise and have pity? Because your servants hold her stones dear and have pity on her dust, verse 14. And so, God cares about what we care about. Cast your cares upon him, 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7. It really takes a new light when you consider the Psalms and you consider how much God cares about what we care about. And the psalmist knows this, and he prays that. And so he realizes in praying that the nations are going to be put in their place, verse 15, and verse 16, that Zion is going to be built up. And ultimately in verse 17, his prayers are going to be heard because God hears the prayers of the destitute. And having connected that moment of suffering with eternity, what he now hopes is not just for deliverance for himself or even deliverance for his people. He hopes that this moment can be a moment that people look back upon and a moment that strengthens the faith of future generations. And I love that forward thinking in this prayer. In verses 18 through 22, notice how he says he wants this to be recorded so that a future generation can come to praise the Lord. He wants people to be able to reflect upon how God came down and how he set those prisoners free, and how the name of the Lord continued to be declared in Zion, and people from all of the kingdoms, they gather together, they worship the Lord. He wants this to be a moment that contributes to something truly great. And I think that if you're praying and you're in a terrible spot, you allow eternity to enter into that moment in that way, it's going to really help you in that moment. He hasn't forgotten about his complaint. In verses 23, 24, he prays again. He realizes that he has been kind of broken down mid-course. His strength is gone. He says, "I don't want to have this be the end. I want to continue. I have a purpose here. I want to be able to continue and be a part of this ongoing story." But because eternity has again entered into the picture, he reflects upon God's eternality in verses 25 through 27 yet again, and he concludes with this very hopeful statement in verse 28. "Children of your servants shall dwell secure, all of them, including me," he says. "Their offspring shall be established before you." And so again, the encouragement of this psalm is to allow eternity to enter into the moment and to engage the moment from the standpoint of eternity. It's very hard to do. I don't say that that's easy, and if that's not where you're at, there are certainly psalms that aren't able to do that, or written from a perspective of one who is not able to do that. But if you can pause and reflect upon the fact that there is something bigger happening here, I truly believe that it's going to help you in that moment of trial, just like it helped the psalmist. And maybe, just maybe, what God does in your life can be something that future generations look back upon and say, wow, God is faithful. And it might be something that causes them to continue to worship Him and encourage them in their walk. And so, may God bless you today. May God bless us to have this kind of perspective when we suffer, when we feel like we're cut down mid-course and stop from doing what we wish, and we feel like we're alone and people are taunting us. God is there. He is eternal, and may He bless you today.